All right, Russell, why don't you take it away?
Hi, my name is Russell Van Brocklen, otherwise known as the Dyslexic Professor. My story with dyslexia really culminated when I applied in the late '90s for an New York State Assembly internship program. I went in with a first grade reading and writing level, so they placed me in the Majority Leaders Program and Counsel's office because there's three administrative assistants who could help me out. At the end of the program, we had to do a major research report. But as a dyslexic, I was given the opportunity that was normally granted to me back then of giving a very long presentation with a heavy Q&A section. And at the end, they granted me 15 credits recommendation of an A minus. Well, that went up to my political science department at the State University of New York Center at Buffalo, and they said, "We don't like those accommodations. So here's your 15 credits of F." And at that point, that was the only time this has ever happened in that entire internship, even ever since then. And it's still there, and it infuriated me. So I wanted to fix dyslexia for people like me. So with that, after college, I decided to do where can I learn to read and write faster than any place? Law school. Going into law school
Very
with a
good.
first grade reading and writing ability, you can imagine that this was probably had disaster written all over it.
Are you wasting hours every week on clunky systems and manual processes just because every consultant's told you enterprise solutions cost tens of thousands of dollars? That's a lie, and it's killing your business. If you're a small town entrepreneur, a growing business owner, or a nonprofit, you already feel the pressure. Every hour wasted on spreadsheets or duct tape apps is an hour stolen from actually growing your business. Here's the truth. You don't need a massive budget to compete with an enterprise level. I'm Cody, the weird Canadian, and I've spent over a decade building multi-billion-dollar systems for government and Fortune 500 companies. Now I bring that same expertise to entrepreneurs like you with scalable websites, custom applications, and smart automations, all built on a shoestring. My process is simple. I analyze your business to see where you're bleeding time and money. I strategize the high impact solutions for your budget. I execute systems that scale with you, and I optimize so you keep on growing without adding chaos. And on top of that, I'm there with you to explain every process and how it works and why it works for you. Now imagine having enterprise grade systems that save you hours a week, let you compete with the bigger players, and give you confidence knowing your business runs smoothly, even while you sleep. That's the freedom you've been chasing. Stop waiting, start scaling. Book your strategy consultation today, and let's build the business systems you deserve. Looking forward to working with you, and let's stay weird.
But what I found happened to me happened to a lot of other dyslexics. We would go into graduate school and then we just own the place. So let me kind of give you an example of what's going on. You said that you were ADHD.
Yes, yeah.
Let me ask you this question. First of all, we need to find out your speciality, your area of extreme interest and ability. So if it's on a Saturday morning, you can do anything you wanted all day. What would it be? What's your speciality? What are you really good at? What do you love to do?
Saturday, well, this is the thing. I'm a very lazy person, so I like to watch TV, but if I really want to do something, I'm a programmer at heart. I'm loving AI, like exploring, learning, basically data is my zone. I love to learn, apply my learnings, figure out what doesn't work and go from there. Like I like to iterate, I like to build that kind of thing,
Okay.
but mostly in code.
Okay. So coding. Okay. So let me ask you this question. When you're thinking about coding, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed? Key question, but with little to no organization. Sound familiar?
Yep, that's basically my entire life.
Okay. So what happened to me to draw people directly into this is I walk in, I specifically went there to work with Professor Warner. He was a dyslexic law professor for decades. It's my second day of contracts, and what they do is they use the Socratic method. If you want to know more about it, there's a famous movie called The Paper Chase, and I think it was the 70s. They call on you. If you don't know the answer, then they keep asking you questions to try to compel you to learn how to argue any side, anywhere, anytime. That didn't happen to me. That chaos suddenly crystallized. Things slowed down really slow and organized for the first time. And we went in a polite but fierce debate back and forth. I knew where he was going multiple steps ahead. He knew where I was going. At the end of 15 minutes, he said, Russell, in the interest of time, I have to move on to the next case. You couldn't be any more correct. My classmates looked at me and they're going, huh? The ones that finished told me they couldn't do what I did, after graduation, what I did the second day of class. Then when I moved on to property, we were giving quizzes. What they do in law school is everybody knows everything,
Mhm.
but they try to trick you. They're incredibly gifted at it. And you're supposed to think for 3 to 5 minutes after reading a multiple choice question. I didn't think for 3 to 5 seconds. I was done within a matter of less than 2 seconds. And I was almost always right. First one done, 20, 30 minutes to spare. Like, this is weird. And then that solved the reading. Next couple of years, I solved the writing. Then I wanted to share it with everybody. And I said, I want the New York State government to fund my research. Well, long story short, I ended up getting them to do that. But what I decided to do was to take, if you're going into grad school in North America, you're most likely going to be taking the graduate records exam. They have an analytical writing assessment, but it's the same as any other, the GMATs, the MCAS, whatever, same thing. Very analytical. So I said, okay, we're going to use that measurement. So I restricted the study to students who were like me. They were highly intelligent, highly motivated, excellent family support, college bound, high school juniors and seniors. Multi-year study funded by the New York State Senate, 1 class period a day for the school year. They started with middle school writing skills. At the end, they were writing in the average range of entering graduate school students. They had the writing skills of a college graduate before they started. Their spelling and grammar was horrendous pre-test, clean at the graduate level post-test. Teachers spent very little time on it. Cost less than $900. They all went to college. They all graduated. GPAs between 2.5 to 3.6. I thought I did something amazing. I thought I was done. I was wrong. I was asked for 2 major points. First off, what about everybody else? What about the kids? And second off, the professor says, we don't care. We want the craft of research, which is the embedment. If you can do that and you know nothing about AI, you'll be far more effective than almost anybody else as a prompt engineer. So let's just get back to the first one. How do we work with everybody with dyslexia? First thing you have to understand is anytime anybody in my field says we got something better than post-Orton Gillingham, that's multi-sensory, see it, touch it, hear it, multi-senses, structured literature, language approach. Why? Because that's what Bill Gates had dyslexic kids. This is what he would use. I'm saying it's time to move on. All right. And with that, this is the book in my field. It's from Dr. Cecilia Shaywitz from Yale. All right. And this is the brain image. So I'm just going to ask you, do you see the back part of the dyslexic brain has almost no neural activity compared to a gen ed brain?
Yep.
Okay. Now, do you see that the front part of the dyslexic brain is about 2.5 times overactive?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, according to Yale, that was narrative followed by word analysis. So that's what I did with the GRE. It's very much, I'm sorry, it's articulation followed by word analysis. So the GRE was almost all articulation, very little word analysis. But to work with all the dyslexic students, I had to switch that to word analysis followed by articulation. All right. So let's go ahead and ask you again. Remember when I asked you about your speciality? If you're going to move this to typical students for dyslexics, you have to stay in their speciality. For the most motivated kids, you step outside of it, you're down 50%. For an average kid, you're down about 75, 80%. So let me give you an example. Are you familiar with a movie called Fast and Furious?
Yep.
Remember when Paul Walker, he pulls in a car from the junkyard, Paul Walker's sitting down with a genius design kid, and he's amazed, and he says, how come you're not at MIT? And he says, I can do this really well. I can't do the other stuff. Okay?
One of the reasons why I went to college over university is I could practically build it, but I couldn't tell you how I built it.
Exactly. And remember how I kept coming back to those ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? That's exactly the issue. Same with dyslexia. So now, what we have to do is we have to force students to stay in that speciality. To give you an example, my most popular book when I do this with kids, surprisingly, is this monster, this 1,000-page book on Disney. Have you ever been to Disneyland or Disney World?
Yeah, I went to Disney, the one in Florida. I don't know which one that is.
Okay, yeah, Disney World. Have you noticed that when you walked into the Magic Kingdom, it felt like a magical place? That magic is based on two universal themes. The first one is real easy to find. The second one, the one that's by far the most important, it's hard to find. I've never had a parent find it. Give you an example. I started working off with a client when she was 10, reading that 1,000-page book that's designed for 17 and 18-year-olds. 2 years later, her mom tried to find the second universal theme. Mom has a master's degree. Dad has an MBA. They can't find it. And she goes, Mom, it's right here. And it was crazy because this is the first time that the mom said, it was right in front of my face and I couldn't find it. And I said, well, your 12-year-old daughter can now comprehend better than you can. Have I done my job? And, she would say yes. So we have to deal in that speciality. We get this kid to pick an audio book and something they're really interested in. Why? If you get an audio book, you can find the real book. So then we're going to come to, that's the first part of the model. Now we have to come to the second one. What got me when I was talking to top dyslexic professors is this was kind of weird. A lot of them were STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, but they're taking like art history, philosophy in college. And I said, well, good for you. They said, some of them said we didn't like those classes. It's like, well, why are you taking them? Because they didn't teach, the professor didn't teach from the general to the specific. He taught from the specific to the general. So do you remember in school when you were asked a big question like, what triggered World War II? You just can't think of anything. It's like grabbing for fog. Sound familiar?
Well,
Okay,
that's my brain. Yeah, like if you give me an open-ended question that it's too broad, I can't answer it. Like nothing comes to my mind. But if you give me a specific question, I can expand on that and make that generalized, most likely.
exactly. So that's why we teach from the specific to the general. So for example, if we were talking about Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, we would ask what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous I Have a Dream speech. You have something to latch onto, and then we force our brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. So again, we force the brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output, and that allows us to go step by step further out. Does that make sense?
It
Okay.
completely. It's
Okay. So let me ask you one more question. So the first question I asked you was about your speciality. An idea is flying in your head at light speed with little to no organization. That indicates ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia. I'm now going to ask you about severe dyslexia. I want you to think about, you want to write something, so you're going to type it. Fingers,
yep,
keyboard, fingers, keyboard. The idea is in your head. You take your fingers, you put them on the keyboard. Does the idea just fly out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain?
not at all.
Not at all. That would be severe dyslexia. What you just said by saying no, you don't have severe dyslexia. I just saved your listeners about $5,000 for a neuropsych exam. Literally,
Very fair.
you can, and it's nice to have, but those two questions tell me the difference between the two. All right. And the treatment is the same. The issue is ADD kids and ADHD kids will just pick it up a lot faster. The severe dyslexia tends to go deeper. All right. So then our last point is, remember I said we're going to switch around to word analysis followed by articulation. Let me show you how that works, for example. I want you to imagine, have you ever seen a kid who's dyslexic or ADD, ADHD, and they can't write anything? They're essentially writing randomly placed misspelled words. You ever met a kid
Yes.
like
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
Okay, change their name. Give me the name of the child. Tom. Okay. What is Tom's speciality? What's his area of extreme interest and ability?
Money.
Money. Okay. How old is Tom?
He's not a kid anymore, but I'm going for his.
Okay. Well, just think of this as a coding exercise. All right. So we have Tom. So what we're going to do to get, so we need to get Tom to write a basic 3-word sentence. Okay. So we start off with hero, plus sign. What are we talking about? We switch out hero for Tom. Tom, plus sign. What are we talking about? Switch out. What are we talking about for money? Tom, plus sign, money. He's typing all this stuff out. You're typing it. He's copying it. Okay. So now we got Tom, plus sign, money. We need to exchange the plus sign for a word to make this a real sentence. So are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Here's my question. Remember, you have to be precise. Does Tom like or dislike money?
Money.
Okay. Replace the plus sign with that word. What's the sentence? Yes, but that's not what I asked. I asked, does Tom like or dislike? You're educated, so you added the S and filled it in. Tom's dyslexic. He can't add the S. He doesn't know how. So he would have put like, so we got Tom like money. Now getting Tom to add the S, if we were using multisensory, we're talking seeing, touching, hearing, every sense you can throw at it, structured language. It's really complicated, but it works. I'm going to try to say there's a better way. My assumption is that Tom speaks proper English. So what we do is I ask Tom to read what he wrote out loud. Tom like English. Sorry, Tom like money. Because I would say, Tom, does that sound generally correct? Again, Tom, does that sound generally correct? He's going to say no. I'll say, fix it. Tom likes money. We practice that with 10 likes and 10 dislikes. That's word analysis. Then we do because reason one. Types out reason one separately. Okay. After because is articulation. See how we're now using the overactive front part of the brain?
Yep.
Now, parents are going to say, yeah, but what about the spelling? What about the grammar? Here's how we get it to autocorrect. Tom writes out, Tom likes money because it buys stuff. Okay. Now, there's probably going to be some misspelled words in there. So here's the rule. Before he puts down the period, he can ask any question. So he can ask, did I spell stuff correctly? And if he's wrong, he just has to retype stuff. But once he puts the period down, if there's a spelling mistake or a major, and I mean major grammatical mistake, then he has to retype the entire sentence. When they do that, I tell them one of two things. You made a silly mistake or a silly error. Those are the least offensive ones I could find. So as he's typing them out, he keeps making the same mistake, and he starts to hyper concentrate. Let me know if this sounds familiar. I'm not going to make that mistake. And he keeps making it. Then he keeps hyper concentrating somewhere between 3 and 12 times typically. Sometimes you see sweat coming down their forehead. He keeps making those mistakes until he doesn't. And when he's hyper concentrating on not making that mistake, that's where the magic happens. And then over time gets it correct. Once you do it 20 times, 10 likes, 10 dislikes, correct, and I have him keep repeating the same thing, then we move on to reason two. Same thing. Reason one, reason two, and reason three. Same thing. Now, at the end of that, what we have done is we have taken, and this might take here's the thing with my material. The older you are, the quicker you pick it up. Even if it's in a kid who's in elementary school, if it takes a month, 6 months, whatever, you have just moved that kid from writing at the kindergarten level, maybe first grade, depending on who you ask, to the end of second, to beginning of third.
that it makes a lot of sense because you're basically reinforcement learning every time they're. I'm gonna put this. It's gonna. I'm basically analyzing how my childhood was, which was me hyper focusing on getting it perfect, which ended up reinforcing me to keep on learning the same thing over and over again until I knew it was perfect, and then I could use it. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
methodology that
it
you're
sounds
talking?
very familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're given a task, essentially, do you see now how what the problem is that you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization by practicing until perfection. And remember, we're taking very little micro steps here, a lot of practice to get that right, that then you can use it effectively. That's
Yes, I
essentially your
can.
life story. All right. And
Yes.
again, I'm just bringing the science to this, just to come back to it. We are not
Yeah.
using the back part of the brain because we got almost no neural activity there, but the front part's about 2.5 times overactive. All right. So I have this weird theory. If that part of the brain is 2.5 times overactive for us, we should use that. You see how I just kind of explained your whole life in about 15 minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how to move forward. Are you familiar with a book called The Craft of Research?
I'm not.
Okay. Came out in 1995, published by the University of Chicago. They had problems. Their PhD students at one of America's top 10 graduate schools didn't know how to write dissertations. So this book told them how to do it. Let me see if this sounds familiar to you. Step one, context. Get everybody on the same page. Step two, state a problem that's worthy of being solved. Step three, come up with an original solution that's at least moderately original so that the reader learns something substantive or don't bother writing the paper. Sound familiar?
Yep.
That's exactly what the craft of research is all about. So when I presented this in New York City in 2006, the result of my New York State Senate funded research, the professors came and said, "Oh, you had some of your kids scoring 70th percentile on the GRE writing assessment test in high school. We don't care. We want the craft of research." It's like, the craft of what? So then I was like, so you want me to take high school kids and show them how to do stuff for PhDs in grad school? Yes. Okay, well, 20 years later, almost, we're able to do that. So, to give you an example, what I've done with context is I've dropped it to fourth and fifth grade. Problems we do in middle school, solutions we do in high school. All right, it's much more complicated, but that's where the value is now. How important is this to artificial intelligence? Give you two examples. I had a student who graduated last year, and his manager was really big into AI. He comes to me on the phone. He says, "I purposely have avoided this. I don't like it. But I have to use it." And I said, "You've been trained." He said, "What do you mean?" "You've been trained in the craft of research. Go talk to it, type on it, whatever, come up with a context." So he does. Then he comes back. I said, "Okay, and I'll do the same thing for the problem statement." He comes back, "I don't like this." I said, "Well, welcome to the adult world." Then he goes and does the solution. Manager's going through things. I can't use this, can't use this. Look, this good idea. We can use this. Within a week, he was showing other people how to do this. Okay. Why? 'Cause as you know, when you're tackling a coding problem, trying to figure out prompting, okay, how do I get this to do context? You're going to try a lot of different stuff. We have ideas flying around our head at light speed, but with little to no organization. I showed him how to organize his thinking. So
Yeah.
he's trying all this stuff. Some works, most didn't. But as you're banging your head against the wall, as people that are neurodiverse, he came up with things that worked. And then within a week, he was showing other people how to do this. And they're like, "Where did you get your training?" He's like, "I don't know. I just started." He's like, "I don't like this stuff. I was messing around and this is what I found worked. I had to do it." So that's one example. Here's another example. I had a student and she wanted to work with an undergrad professor because with a professor in undergrad. Now, going to a specific professor for grad school for PhDs, very common, rare for an undergrad. End of first class, she goes up to him and says, I'm not really that good at the craft of research. We're a lot better at it now. But she said, I'm not very good at it, but I want to have an office hour with you so we can discuss how I can use this for our first paper. He calls me up. What is a college freshman doing with the craft of research? I have trouble times getting my PhD students to do this. And I said, well, she's been working on it since she was in seventh grade. He's like, what? I said, yeah, we're a lot better at it now. Just again. So I told her strengths and weaknesses. He starts telling me months later, I'm learning small things, but original ideas from a college freshman. This is
Mhm.
almost unheard of. Now, nothing major, but little points that he could use in future lectures. And then he wanted to work with her because of her research and writing ability, not wanting to work with her because she was dyslexic and he couldn't decipher her papers. That's how important the craft of research is.
It kind of emphasizes how I've established everything in my life, because I've always drilled it down to how to ask an appropriate question, or how to ask a proper question. But yeah, like for me, it's just as I get into my problem, everything just kind of aligns, and then it's like, does this work? Does this work? No, yes, continue, and just keep on iterating on what I'm building. And AI's like super powered that. It's just amazing what I can do now with AI. But I didn't realize that I kind of taught myself to be a researcher growing up, because in my past I really enjoyed just learning. That was my good graces, is I went through school just being able to coast because I enjoyed what I was learning, and fed information into me to keep me going. It's what made me happy, was to learn more and more and more. And I didn't realize I kind of structured my entire life into a research oriented person.
Yes. So what I was just showing you, like the craft of research, you're just naturally doing that.
Yeah.
The book put in a way of how to do this, but to be honest with you, in its fifth edition, it's really for, at the earliest, very evolved high school students. I had to figure out how do we drop this, to 9-year-olds. And why is that? Because in the field of dyslexia, it's reading and writing issues. Okay. So what happens is K through 3, we learn to read. Fourth and above, we read to learn. And if you fail your third grade, at the end of third grade reading and writing test, it's a 911 emergency. So when I had to look at context, it was a very simple idea. So what I found is we would create universal themes, define quotes. All right. And then once we found a quote, we would ask who, what, when, where, how, why. The basic questions. And we'd use those to form body paragraphs. But how do we then move on to the problem statement? I would start off by and this is where we start introducing artificial intelligence, because I don't know, have you used ChatGPT that much?
I use all of them daily. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
When a ChatGPT came out with their pro subscription in last December,
Yeah.
$200 a month. I bought it that day.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the summer of 2025. I find O3 Pro to be just, takes 10, 15 minutes to say hi, but it really helps me just think through and just do the data analysis so I can come up with the different ideas to improve things. So we start introducing this AI, pick your model at this point. So what we do is we'll have the quote, the answer to who, what, when, where, how, why for all 3 body paragraphs. And then what we do is we work with AI to slowly keep the core, get rid of the fluff
Yeah.
until we're down to a medium to long sentence that just distills what the context is. Then what we do is I ask the AI and the students to come up with a short to medium length sentence for the problem statement, then to reduce that to a one-word universal theme. Now, once you can reduce it to one word universal theme on your own, over 50% of the time, that's my beginning benchmark to see if you're ready for the solution stage, which is far more complicated. Let's say we have the context, short to medium length sentence, medium to long sentence with a one word universal theme. We run the context through the universal theme to come up with 3 solutions. Now, if you take a very specific context and you run it through a very specific universal theme, the end result that you're going to come up with is going to be severely limited. But these solutions are nothing original, but they're the solutions that you would expect from a well-read individual at that grade level.
Yeah.
All right. Or if you're applying this to the workforce, to a business problem. All right. Get the quotes of what you're looking at, answer the 5 basic who, what, when, where, how, why. Distill it to a medium to long sentence, distill that down to a short to medium problem statement, reduce that to a universal theme, run the context through the universal theme, and you will have good, solid solutions very quickly. I've trained adults in this, and they tend to do this within, once they get practice down with AI in under 2 minutes. All right. And these are good solutions that will withstand criticism. All right. So what I just showed you, that is a different version, a much quicker version of applying context and problem based on the craft of research.
Begs the question: why do we tend to forget the context?
Because remember I said a medium to long sentence?
Yeah.
If you're really going to use your brain, there's only so much information that you can really keep in there at any one point. And what I found about doing this for years is it's a medium to long sentence. And I'm not talking about, some technically, like I think when I was in college, there was some wise guy who said, well, here's a sentence that was technically correct at like 2 pages or something. I'm not talking about that nonsense. I'm talking about your typical book, a medium to long sentence. I try to get it as short as possible, but some things are so complicated, it's hard to get it into that space. And then,
Yeah.
as you see, I kept shrinking it down until we got to a universal theme, and then running the context through the universal theme to coming up with ideas. Well, now each of those ideas is the central point for our problem paragraphs,
Yeah.
which are much more evolved than the context. And the pathetic thing that I found is that the problems will get you through. I designed it for middle school, but it'll
Yeah.
get you through high school. And unfortunately, it'll get you through college. The professors, if you give them what the answers they expect to get, being a
Yeah.
good little parrot, yeah, that works. But then when you step out in the workforce, you're going to be like that student I told you about. People don't want they don't want to train people anymore. They want you to come in and be effective day one. And so that's why when my students who I've trained in the craft of research, they're like, okay, they apply that to the artificial intelligence, and here's your answer. Here's something where you're going to get some value out of it. And the bosses are generally like, what the? Got this kid I hired, and 5 hours later, I got something I can use. What the? And
It sounds like my
sometimes,
co-op experience.
yeah, it's just weird. And sometimes I have my former students saying, well, I'm sorry, it took me 5 hours, but I had to get the data, and I'm not really that good with the AI. I had to kind of figure out how to go through the craft of research stuff with it. And the manager's like, what do you mean 5 hours is too long? Well, my tutor expected me to get things back within an hour or two, and this is 5, so sorry it took me so long. They're just completely befuddled. I've gotten so many calls like that over the years, and I show them Yale's research in the overactive front part of the brain. He said, should I be hiring more people like this? I said, well, if you want to do well in business, you can. There are some gen ed people that can do both, and I gave them a test for that. It's reading an article on post-war Japan as history from Professor Dower.
Yeah.
Yeah, people think dyslexia is a reading issue. I hate to say it, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a symptom. Like when you have a cold, the problem is in your chest, we treat the stuffy nose as a symptom. The inability to read for dyslexia is a symptom. So I give him this book on post-war Japanese history. Literally, the book is called Post-War Japan is History. First article is from Professor Dower from MIT, won the Pulitzer, won the National Book Award. I thought the article was so easy to read. This was after law school when I was studying in Japan. Nobody else could read it. Top students from all over the world, mostly from the United States, and they had excellent GPAs, and they couldn't read it. The problem was in that first paragraph, he had 17 data points, 17, and their brains couldn't keep up with it. Now, the people that I call full brains, and just again to come back to the research, to me, a full brain is a gen-ed person that can think like a dyslexic, but have the reading and writing skills of an AP English kid all together, both of those together, high functioning front and back. They'd look at it, this is nothing. But I bring it to Harvard, half the kids there couldn't get past the first paragraph. And if you hire the non-dyslexic, non-neurodiverse, the typical person who could read that, they turned out to be amazing employees. The ones that couldn't, they eventually let go. He said, you're turning my HR based on a post-war Japanese history article. I said, well, yeah. And that's one of the more unique areas of my research that people found intriguing. He said, we can find the best gen ed people with the ability of dyslexics in one by the ability to read this one article. I said, pretty much that's what it comes down to. And it's just something I've had when I was in the class, and I thought it was a joke. This was the easiest thing I ever found to read. And nobody else could read it. And it took me years to figure all that stuff out. But that's where I tend to leave dyslexics, and what drives their olders and brothers and sisters crazy, because they tend to be fighting to become valedictorian, is that their dyslexic sibling, their younger sibling, can now read things they can't. Drives them nuts.
That's very fair, but at the same time, it kind of goes into a point that I've been making for a little while now that, the statement, the meek shall inherit the earth?
Right.
I think that really stands for the neurodiverse are eventually going to inherit the earth, because we learn differently, but we also empathize across the spectrums for everybody. We're not frustrated when we hit a wall, and we don't try to take it out on somebody else. Most times we take it out on ourselves. I feel like the world would be better with neurodivergence in charge.
Well, when you're talking, let me kind of explain why that's the case. This is a very small subset of students. Just so everybody knows, this is the unusual part. There's a third question. Okay. I'll give you the background of the student. Typically, they're barely hitting honor roll at 85, 86. Okay. Their siblings are typically fighting to be valedictorians. Parents are highly educated. Education is incredibly important in the household. The kid is incredibly brilliant. And they get by with just being on the low end honor roll or just below it. And I get them in high school. And this is kind of how I cheated on my first one, when we had those huge jump ups. Tell you what happened. I would ask the kids. It happened. I said, I know your secret. Freaks them out. Completely freaks them out. So I said, it happened started in elementary school, somewhere between second and fifth grade, probably third or fourth. Some teacher came to you and said, if you don't pass this academic task, we're going to hold you back. It's especially devastating for girls at that age. We're going to take your friends away. They're going to move on. You're going to stay back. So then they became incredibly frustrated. I mean, to the point of being clinically dangerous, telling themselves, if I don't pass this, my parents won't love me anymore. My friends will abandon me. They put so much pressure on themselves that then the answer to this academic task they have to overcome presents itself. Essentially, they're doing doctoral level research when they're 8 years old. All right. And then, as I said, that became a pattern for you, so that by the time you're in high school, it's just like breathing. And they look at me, and a lot of times they start to cry. They said they never want their parents to understand this. And that ability that I knew the students that went through the program, I knew that was them. So when they were presented with this super hard stuff, the spelling and grammar, they were just naturally able to figure out how to pass it by putting on this extreme pressure. Okay, this extreme, I call it controlled frustration. Well, they did it in much more minor ways in high school. They just got used to it, and that's a big why they improve so quickly. Did that sound familiar to you at all?
Very much so. I put a lot of pressure on myself when I was younger. Actually, I didn't realize how much pressure I put on myself until I moved
Mhm.
out to where I live now and kind of changed my career path and everything. That that line of pressure really, I didn't realize was that prominent,
Oh,
but
but
it has
for
been for a
that,
long, long
for
time.
us, it's a small subset.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, do you find it kind of weird that I just told you a bunch of stuff about yourself we never met before?
a little bit, but I'm starting to dive deep into the neurodivergent world. So I'm finding a lot of similarities between a lot of the different diagnoses and things. So it's weird, but I understand if that makes sense.
Yes, but a big part of your podcast, one that really drew me to me, is you basically essentially put yourself as there's no BS here.
Yeah,
So when I went over those three questions, okay, you have ideas flying around your head and your speciality with little to no organization. Fingers, keyboard, idea flies out. That's not you. But the third one, the pressure you put under, and we're talking, do you see how looking back, it was at some points it got clinically dangerous?
yeah. I There were a good half a decade where I probably should have been in a hospital or something because of how I was treating myself.
But
I'm
did
glad
you
I'm past
always
that
find
point,
that
but yeah.
when you did that, when you put that unbelievable pressure on yourself, that the innovative solutions presented themselves at some point and you were able to move on?
Oh yeah, I was able to get through everything. I succeeded to no end. I established an amazing career, a good life,
Mhm.
and yeah, I thought I had everything I wanted.
But again, I want you to think back. You were told in school if you didn't pass some academic thing, you were held back, some horrible consequence.
It
You
wasn't.
frust
I remember the time it was if you did anything,
Okay,
nothing. I got screamed at once, and after that, I was the perfect student.
okay. But in general, but in other ways, when you really had to put the pressure on yourself, did you find that the solutions came after that pressure?
Always.
Right. Now, I want you to think about you've went through a bachelor's degree?
No, just we don't kind of have those here. I have two diplomas for college, so I have
All right.
computer networking, technical support, and computer programming.
Okay. So if you were to go on to graduate, I'm just going to tell your audience what happens. I'm giving you as an example. If you were to go on for finish your bachelor's, go on for a PhD, all they care about is the idea. That's it. Nothing else. All the other doing the testing, writing it up, and all that. If you weren't an exceptional student, you wouldn't be in the program to begin with. They just assume you can do it. Do you see now with that ability that you taught yourself to come up with solutions that mattered? And you were how old when you did this?
12, 13, maybe.
12, 13. Okay. I was doing that when I was like 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Dyslexics have to push it, or have to do it a bit earlier than people that are ADHD. All right. But regardless, you get to a PhD program, you're in a very narrowly focused area, and they say, what is your contribution to the field? You will either have it when you walk through the door, or you will have a very general idea of what it is, and it will just show itself relatively soon.
Yeah.
All right. The original idea is the currency of the realm. You can take that idea, and I have literally seen, gen ed students who are now in PhD programs who literally go to the dyslexic and say, can I be part of your project? I will do like just about all the work. You just, hang back and you develop the idea. And the dyslexic's like, I'm not good at this work stuff. Yeah, I'll share. And it works. So I want to exemplify for everybody that if you're dyslexic, ADD, or ADHD, if you can get through college and you want to go to a graduate program, you will own the place. When I worked with Professor Collins, He was the author of Strategies for Struggling Writers. Guess how long it took me to get my curriculum approved by him? Less than 2 weeks. I had no choice. There
Yeah.
was a university-wide competition I had in. I won $15,000 to test it out in the first couple of kids. And without testing in those first couple of kids and then having the Averill Park Central School District just outside of Albany going to my state representative, who at the time was the majority leader of the state Senate, and saying, yeah, we want to do this. They wouldn't have funded me.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to, your audience to understand the ability for people like us, that frustration. I want to have kids go through this at a younger age so they don't have to experience that level of frustration.
I like how you're framing it though, as you've given support to that frustration as well, whereas we had to kind of support ourselves and get into
Hmm.
those not weary areas. It's really good because I wish I had somebody to tell me, hey, like you're doing good, like you're okay, like you can get through this, because I don't think I would have had that stretch of dangerous anxiety and dangerous practices along. I like that you're giving a handhold to those who need it.
Yeah.
Um,
So, but here's my main question: did I pass your BS test?
that you basically just told my entire childhood story growing up. Um,
And before this, we'd never met. So I just want people to understand: I've been doing this for over 20 years. All right.
I,
There is a pattern out there. Does it fit perfectly with everyone? Like when I went over with you, you were like, yes, no, yes.
yeah,
Okay. Everybody's a little bit different, but the pattern generally holds. Okay. And the reason why you are who you are now is because those of us who have survived this, you will find that organizations run by people like us are generally about the best places to work because we don't want to treat people the way that we were treated.
that's why I
All
created
right.
my own company.
Yes. Okay. And do you have employees?
I have a few. They're just kind of on contract right now. I'm not established
Right.
yet. I
But
just started the
yeah.
company.
A lot of us do. A lot of us do that to avoid all the good grief. One of my friends started having employees. His home was his office, and he had to put up all these like OSHA
Yeah,
posters and everything. A lot of us who are dyslexic and ADD, ADHD, we tend to subcontract. A lot of our, so we don't have to worry about that stuff. But I'm sure that when your employees come to you, and I'm sorry, your contractors come to you, you're very polite to them about things. It's
yeah.
like,
I even have a channel that says "fuck you, Cody," and they can yell at me if I've done anything wrong.
well, I can tell you, I'm working on a book right now because New York State was supposed to completely redo K-5 education. They did a year-long study to figure out how to do it, and then they found out this year they can't afford it. So the process that I showed you, I'm like, okay, let's do that, and let's show parents how they can teach their kids so they can do it directly because the state and school have failed. And I'm working with my co-author. I'm sorry, with my ghostwriter. Okay, and she's telling me she had a family emergency, and she says, "Is there any way I can, maybe do yours a bit later because I have these clients who just won't say no because she had to come back to that." And I'm now on my fifth extension. They're only a couple of days each. I said, "Sure, I'm your pressure valve." And so because I've worked with her in the past on different projects, and what I'm getting back is when I ask for something, she's right there.
Yeah,
But the other thing is, she says, "Well, I owe you, so I'll do this for no cost." And I said, "Nope, I'm paying you." Like the book we're doing, my co-authors is Evelyn Whitebay, who's on the Dyslexia Task Force, and she's 3 to 4x more effective than the typical special ed teacher in New York State. And I said, "No, I'm paying you a lot more because it's going to be another month before we even get the outline down. I'm going to keep sending you stuff." And what I do is every time we come up with a major revision, I work with O3 Pro and I rewrite the entire book. And I sent it to her. I said, "Read this. No, we are not," because she says I'm X amount per X number of words or Y number of words. I said, "No, not with this because I really want to get this correct." And she said, "You are too good to me." I said, "Well, You're the very best that I could find that for somebody that I can afford. You're doing an excellent job. And you want to keep creative people happy because creativity doesn't come on a clock.
One of the
Okay.
biggest things that I tell people is I no longer work on the hour because I don't have creative on the hour. I have creative when I can do it. And if that
Yeah.
means I build it in 3 hours, then I build it in 3 hours. But I should be charging for the product, not that
Yeah.
time.
And what you're going to find, and this is what I think everybody needs to, we're moving to that model. As business owners, we understand I would rather pay, X number of dollars to know what I'm getting. But with the artificial intelligence, you're either going to be on one side of it and become a lot more valuable and make a lot more money, or you're going to be on the other side, which is not going to look good. If you can do the craft of research reasonably well, you're going to be on one side. Like I had one grown up that I was training, no dyslexia. He just wanted to learn my process. And he said, well, they just came out with this thing called agents from ChatGPT. I said, don't worry about it. Now it's running that 4.0 model, which is horrible. The research agent is running on 0.3, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. I said, but eventually it's going to get good. But you know the craft of research now. Apply it. You can now, do you see how you can guide? He's like, oh, yeah, I got a lot of trial and error. I said, yeah, so what? That's time. It's not going to take you much time to figure this out. So, yeah, I get to see. I'll be able to guide it. I said, exactly. So, like what I do, again, this is summer of 2025. I will have one model open on the web with O3 Pro running. And then I'll have another one on the app on my MacBook Air, running another one, and then I'm doing some other task. And then when it binks, when it's done, I go back and I fiddle out, and then I send it back to its 15 minutes of thinking, then the second one, and then I keep going back between those three areas. And the amount of work that I'm able to get through.
I'll send you my AI because it's agents, but it's more like it's better. It's way better.
Oh no,
Um,
ChatGPT agents right now sucks.
oh, I've had this for 6 months now, and
Okay,
it's been agents before ChatGPT even announced it. So I'll send you this because this is firmed out, really
okay.
well made, and it's really good for agents. We should sum this up because I do have a podcast right after this. For our listeners who want to learn more about getting their child help, what's the best first step?
Best thing to do is to go to dyslexiaclasses.com. Again, it's dyslexiaclasses, plural.com. And we have a contact form there. Just fill that out and I'll get right back to you. And what we'll do is we'll sit down. I give you a free hour session where we just answer your questions. I ask those questions that I gave you. I asked the first two. The third one, again, the kids, I tend to avoid unless there's a real need for it. The kids go, how did you know? And I'd say, well, you're not the only one. People have done this before. And then I asked, is this how you want to learn? And they will say yes or no. Mostly it's yes. If it's no, I'm not your person. If it's yes, and I sit down with the parents and say, okay, I'm going to show you how to work with your kid. Most parents do 2-3 times a week, 10, 25 minutes a session. A lot of those sessions, after a while, the kids can do themselves. And you're going to see a remarkable process because the school system doesn't teach in a speciality. They teach everything. They don't teach from the specific to the general. They go from general to the specific, and they certainly don't do word analysis, verbal articulation. So they're doing everything they can to make this not work. Parents can use the model that works, and that's about it.
I feel like all school systems are in the models that don't work anymore. And one last question. What would you say to a parent listening right now who feels hopeless about their child's struggles?
I'll just give you an example. I started working with Kimberly last December, and in May, her son Reed, who was 10 years old in fifth grade, he started off reading at the beginning third grade level. By May, she had independent corroboration that he was reading at grade level. How much does an expensive school cost? Windward School in New York City has a 98% success rate. 75 grand a year, 4 to 5 years. Kimberly was faster than the top dyslexic school, doing it very part-time.
And thank you very much for all this information, and I hope it's helped my audience. And I'll make sure all of your information is down in the description below. Thank you very much for coming on, and stay weird.
Thanks for having me on.